Greetings. I would like to again welcome you into my home, where I'm putting together a series of YouTube videos in an effort to highlight different elements of my recently published book, Consciousness, All in One and One in All. Today we're going to focus on Chapter 7. We're moving toward an alternative interpretation of quantum physics. This chapter will largely build on what we discussed in the previous chapter, where we discussed the indivisibility, the lack of a singularity of information. Information informs information within our bodies at every level, top down and bottom up, whether we are aware of it or not. And for the most part, we are not aware of it. Every cell in our body is informing every other cell. We are a collective whole. There is no place where you can separate out one piece of information from another piece of information. Within that understanding, we began to explore the problems with different quantum interpretations involving the observer. These included the hidden variables interpretation, the Copenhagen interpretation, and the interpretation of the physicalists, oftentimes involving the many worlds theory. In this chapter, what I'd like to do is consider that local space-time is derived from the deeper reality of non-local space. Non-local space is what gives rise, or is consistent with, quantum principles of non-locality, non-local space, entanglement upon the collapse of particles in local space, complementarity upon the collapse of particles in local space from waveform to particle, and uncertainty as the infinity of non-local space is somehow realized in local space, where of course it can't be measured because non-local space is beyond space-time. So the collapsed particle is the physical reality of the deeper wave of non-local space, and within local space-time, this particle, and together with all other particles, assumes a certain electromagnetic pattern, shape, form, color, size, length, width, height. These are all electromagnetic patterns, sounds to which we attend. These are the collapsed particles, the accumulated collapsed particles of the waveforms of non-local space. Yeah, it is these particles that create these collapsed particles that can create the conscious perception of independently existing substances with a material consistency in space-time, consistent with the classical physics of space-time. Now, our universe has its own reality, existing for each of us as an idiosyncratic experience. It's our own personal abstraction of the collapse of all of these particles based on our choice of which particles to collapse. Now, it has its own reality, its own existence. It does not depend on us to create it. It does not depend on us to create the smallest particle. An electron wave upon collapse is an electron particle. A photon wave upon collapse is a photon particle, although there's some debate about photon particles. And the same for all other collapsed particles that we experience. There's nothing new created, nothing changes. An electron is an electron, and proton is a proton, a photon is a photon. And beyond that, what we don't observe persists as a wave. The moon doesn't stop existing merely because I don't observe it. The information waves of the moon travel whether seen by me or someone else or not. What really collapses is the individual experience. Consciousness is only responsible for the collapse of information that informs experience. It is not responsible for anything else. Now, there is a quantum continuum here. We're talking about electron, particles, waves. What I want you to try to understand is that every cell in our body, including our brain cells, our neurons, follows the same quantum rules that we measure whenever we measure quantum particles. The neural processes in our brains are chemical, ionic, involving electrons and shifts of electrons, the giving off of energy and photons. And this is happening from moment to moment. Trillions of different different things are happening at once. Different collapses are happening at once as we live our lives, as I sit here and talk and think. Now, this was the brainchild of a fellow named Van Neumann in the 30s. Now, Harry Stapp, an American physicist, took up where Van Neumann left off. He asserted that the observer, me, you, that we have two roles. One is to experience the output of any measuring device, and any measuring device can be the camera, it can be a bug, it can be the cellular reactions that are going on in my body. So we experience those outputs, and he called that Dirac, D-I-R-A-C choices. The other role of the observer is to choose which Dirac choices to attend on a bigger level. This is what he referred to as the Heisenberg Choice. He went on to posit that the brain exists in a quantum state as a cloud of potentials of wave functions, a cloud of exclusive but interconnected. It's hard to really describe that. Exclusive from the standpoint of different experiences, but interconnected from the standpoint that these experiences inform one another. So we have these cloud of possible neural options that exist, and we collapse one of these options when we attend to one of them, while the other neural options remain uncollapsed. And the longer we persist in asking the same question, pursuing the same observation, the more we can change the neural patterns that are established as a result of these collapses. So we persist in a certain pattern of collapse. It follows a neural pattern, and we continue to ask the same questions and persist in collapsing the same cloud of potentials, and further establishing, reinforcing that neural pattern while perhaps extinguishing other neural patterns to which we are not attending. Now, the choice to attend, as we talked about in the previous exploration, depends on top-down issues that have to do with knowledge, experience, the situation at the time, beliefs, and that is what we call the psychological part of this. Whereas the electrons, the waves, the particles that are collapsed, the ions that are exchanged, the things that occur with DNA and RNA and peptides, and these are the physical part of this equation. And so what Harry Stapp was getting at was a psychophysical event, psychological and the physical. Now, one of the things that we can come to understand as we consider this idea is that the observer, you, me, we are continuous with the information that's being observed on a quantum level. The electron waves give rise to, or any particles waves give rise to the particles. And in this case with the brain, these particles exist as a cloud of potentials to be realized upon different potential experiences, resulting in neural patterns. So the electrons, in this case, focusing on them, they result in different neural patterns that will become experiences and make us who we are. There really is no line in the sand that we can draw between what we collapse by observation and our ultimate experience. It's continuous and it's ever changing and ongoing. This brings me to the concept of animal consciousness. What does it mean for animals to be conscious? Are they conscious? I mean, we anthropocentrically define consciousness in human terms, such that some people, I'm recalling Daniel Dennett, insisting that he knew what it was like for a bat to fly. Well, a fellow named Nagel in the late 1950s wrote a very influential paper on what it is like to be a bat. And he essentially asserted that we can imagine what it's like to fly. We can imagine what it's like to do different things that a bat does, but ultimately we cannot know what that is because we're not bats. Now, this might be easier to understand if you have a pet, because not too many of us know much about bats. Is there such a thing as an alpha bat? I don't know. But I do have a pet dog. Her name is Nala. She's a combination of Border Collie and Labrador, and so we commonly refer to her breed as a Borador. She's mostly Border Collie, so she would be useless to any hunter in the field that's looking for the features of a Labrador. She does not retrieve. Rather, like a Border Collie, she herds. So when we play ball, she doesn't bring the balls back to me, unfortunately. She herds them together. She pulls them together boy, I got to tell you, she's faster than heck, or she was. She's 11 years old now, so she's not nearly as fast as she used to be. But she responds to, she loves to chase balls, and she responds to different things. We call her our OCD, or our obsessive compulsive dog, because she has certain habits, like before dinner, she has to go out the back door near where we eat. And she has to do this come rain or shine. She barks to let us know that she wants to do this. She's only out for 5, 10, 15 seconds, and then she comes in because she knows she's going to get her fair share of scraps from the dinner table. She responds to her name. She's very obedient. She will sit when I ask her to sit, and dogs can walk by us and people can walk by us, and there she sits as long as I ask her to sit. There is no other dog like Nala. I thank God for that, because I love my dog. Can't imagine her any other way. And I suspect that holds true for bats as well. There is no other bat than any single bat that we observe. So I tend to think that Daniel Dennett is mistaken, and Thomas Nagel thought so too, and insisted that subject is the only unquestionable reality of our experience. There exists no objectivity. And so we can't know what it is to be a bat. We can't know what it is to be a dog. And further, how do we, like an experience, where we can't draw the line on what informs what, where, how do we draw the line between what is conscious and what is not? I know we have these anthropocentric ways of dealing with things, but really, Nala's conscious. I have to assume that bats are conscious. I wonder if plants might be conscious. I wonder if bacteria might be conscious. A fellow named Rupert Sheldrake has written some interesting ideas about these kinds of topics. So let's revisit Schrodinger's cat for just a second, the Copenhagen critique, whereby the cat's in a box. There's a radioactive compound in the box that, upon decay, causes a poison to be released. It has a 50-50 chance of reaching decay. So there's a 50-50 chance of the poison being released, and a 50-50 chance of the cat being dead. Now, the critique went that the cat would only be alive or dead once we opened the box, which of course is silly. And I think we can shed a little more light on this. The cat is of course alive or dead, depending on the cat's own experience, not depending on the definition or nature of consciousness, but depending on the cat's experience. And my experience of the cats being alive or dead is dependent on my observation and my experience. It is not defined by me as an observer, other than my experience of the cat being alive or dead. So at this point, I wish to conclude that experience, consciousness, it exists in all living things, and there is no line in the sand that can be drawn between my superior intelligence and the intelligence of an amoeba. That's of course speculating, but it's consistent with what I'm suggesting at this point. And along with that, what I am also suggesting is that we are all part of a quantum unity. As I say, I can't be separated out from the electrons that are part of my observation experience, nor can the animals or conceivably plants or bacteria that we're talking about here. And that's what I wanted to try to convey here today, that there is a deeper reality, the uncollapsed, is that a word? The uncollapsed waves that result in collapsed particles that ultimately lead to result in neural patterns that are part that I can't say that they define my experience, but they inform my experience. And likewise for cats, dogs, you name it. Again, I would like to thank you for your time. I would like to thank you for your attention. I look forward to our next video, which will be somewhat complex. It's where I ultimately get down to the nitty-gritty of what I'm talking about here regarding consciousness and observation. Be well.